welcome back to my channel. So a few days ago, I was going through my comment section and I came across a commenter who asked about my writing process. So in today's video, I am going to take a little detour from candle making and talk about my other passion, which is writing. Now, if you are new here, my name is Tammy, and I am the owner of Lanaciamarie Candle Company, but I am also a writer who is hoping to one day publish, finally, one of my books and put it out there for others to read. Now, enough about me rambling. Let's get into it. So, writing is my talent. Everyone has a talent, and writing is mine. I can remember writing from the moment I was able to pick up a pen and write my name to all the way up until now. Writing in my earlier years were a way for me to escape school bullies and neighborhood bullies from first grade all the way up until 11th grade, and it was just a way for me to escape. Of course, back then, it was more so poems that I wrote, and a lot of it was dark and negative because I was going through what I was going through. But it was a way for me to cope with dealing with the traumas that I was going through at that time, and it was a way for me to escape into a whole different world once I started writing short stories. I think I started writing short stories when I was probably I think my first short story was, and it was really short. I think it was when I was in, I want to say the third grade. Yeah, I want to say the third grade. And I don't quite remember what it was about. All I know is that there was a boy in it, a cat, and a dog was in it. And my mother kept the story all the way up until we moved into our apartment, our last apartment. And then it got lost in the move somehow. But back then I was writing short stories. And then as the years progressed and I got older, I started to write more and more longer stories. And the first one I remember was called Mob Life. I am, how do you say, I am just heavily enthralled in the mob world, the mob life. Not as much as I used to be, but at that time I used to love learning any and everything about the mafia, about the criminal bosses, about the officers and the lawyers that were trying to take down the crime world. The whole thing I was just in awe about. So that's when my first full long book actually came about. And since then, I've written about 6 books to completion, and 1 book that is still stuck in my head and still underdeveloped, and that has been sitting on my mind for the past, I want to say 12 years now, 13 years now. For some reason, I'm just stuck in that and moving that book further, and I just need to do the research, and I haven't really done the research for it. But I've written 6 books to full completion, and none of them are published, unfortunately. So I am hoping to now publish my most recent book that I've written, that I'm working on now and revamping and redesigning some things on it. But yeah, that is my little writing history there. It is a passion of mine, and it is a talent of mine, and I've written everything from poems to short stories to long stories to thoughts to quotes to anything that comes to my head, anything that my imagination can think of, I have written it. So that passion for it has never died down. It might go away for a little bit, but it always comes back once my mind starts thinking of something. So when I saw someone ask me about my writing process, I was kind of excited to talk about it because I usually don't talk about my writing in that way. I always talk about what I'm working on and hoping to have it published, self published one day, but that's pretty much as far as I go. And the reason why is because nobody really has ever showed an interest in my writing personally. Like people that I know, they've never showed a real interest in my writing, so I pretty much keep it to myself and I just enjoy it for myself. But it is time for me to finally put my talent out there and share a little bit of the process that I use when it comes to writing. So when she asked me, a supporter here asked me about my writing process, I was excited to do this video, and I'm hoping that it helps her like map out a way to write her own book, because she shared that she wants to write her own book but she doesn't know where to start. So I am going to give a little insight on my process here today in this video. So the first thing I do, of course, is I rely on my imagination and my observing my surroundings. So for every single one of my books that I have written, they have come from me observing my surroundings. I can speak most recently in my current book. My character Gage came from me going to work one day on the train, and I noticed this lady across from me sitting with a shopping cart, and her nose was running and she couldn't find a tissue to wipe her nose, right? So that right there sparked me to just think about, well, what if there was a guy there who was on a mission and he took the subway train and he got on and he sat next to this elderly lady and her nose is running, and he pulls a handkerchief out of his pocket and gives it to her. And she wipes her nose and she goes, "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much," because people don't do that these days anymore. And he's getting off the next stop and she goes to hand him the handkerchief back. I know it's a little nasty to hand a used handkerchief. And he goes, "No, ma'am, you take that, you keep it." And he gets off the train, and as he's walking right off the train, she grabs his hand and kisses his hand and says, "Thank you so much for being so kind to me today." And the doors close and he's on his way. So that right there just sparked a whole intro to a story. Using your imagination, and just by taking one little thing out of the real world is how I tend to come up with my stories. Just a short story, just a short little tidbit right there, and I can build on that and make it into a longer story. So now that I came up with that little snippet just by observing my surroundings and putting a little short story to it, I mean a really short story to it, next thing I do is I map the whole thing out in my head. I start mapping everything out in my head. So that means I think of the character's background. What do they do? What type of family they come from? Do they have living family, friends? What is the problem that they're encountering, or problems that they're encountering, and how are they going to solve those problems? Now, the next thing is where traditional book writing comes into play. And you want to outline everything. So the first thing I do when it comes to writing a book, I outline the main character development. Who are they? What is their name? Their full name, if they have a full name, first and last. What are their personality? What their personality is like. What traits do they have? What pet peeves do they dislike? How are they going to interact with the rest of the characters in the book? And then that's followed up by the supporting characters in the story. I give them full names, I give them personalities and traits as well, and I do the reverse and how they are going to interact with the main character of the story. So when I speak about character development, here is just an example of mine. It is not the actual file because I just realized the file that I had first created is on my other computer. But this is just an example of what I mean when I say character development. So this is my main character here. His name is Gage Sullivan. And as you can see, I put him as main character. And then he is the head lieutenant of the Madden crime family. And then below him, I list all the characters that are going to be involved in this book here. So going from Pete Madden, who is head of the Madden crime family, and then list what his job is, his relation to Gage, and so forth and so on. So I do that for every character. And what's not shown here is that I have a list of their personalities and their traits as well, so that I can get an idea when I envision them in my head what they're going to look like and how they're going to interact. How they're going to react to certain things. I usually don't think of actual features of characters. I leave that in my head because the way I write my stories is I give as little features to the main character as possible because I want the reader to envision someone on their own to put into that spot. So I normally don't detail my main characters, but everyone else gets full-on details as far as their physical attributes go. So the next thing when it comes to creating outlines is a timeline of the story or the plot. And what I like to do here is I just write like quick sentences, 1 or 2 sentences, and it just gives a timeline of what happens with the character, what happens from the beginning, middle, and to the end. This helps me develop what's going to go into the chapters a little bit better. So let me show you what I mean when I say timeline of the plot / story. So here is an example that I was talking about creating a timeline for your plot or your story. So here I created a timeline for Gage's age. So at each milestone that I list here, it details how I want the story to move forward. So with this one, I have Gage in this first book because I do plan to write a follow-up to this one. But in this book, I have Gage stopping at a certain age, and then that's when the main plot of the story fully takes off. So this is just background that you see on this timeline here for the top part. Like at age 15, he drops out of high school and dedicates his days to hanging on the streets and making moves with Pete, Gary, and Jeff. So that just not only details what he's doing at age 15, it also gives you a little background of how they became who they were later on in the book. So it gives a little backstory and it builds the backstory a little more. And then at the end, I have it where it's the year 2017 and he's 34 years old, and that's where the main story takes off, and he's plateaued at that age throughout the remainder of the book. So it outlines, this one pretty much outlines everything. So a timeline can pretty much list anything. It can list years and ages. It could just list the main key points of the story, and it's just something to give you like a quick reminder of what are you going to talk about in each chapter as you start to develop your story from beginning to end. And then finally, the last thing of creating an outline is outlining your chapters. I tend to leave my chapters at chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 because it's just a rough draft. And then I start to develop the name of the chapters. Um, Either they come to me as I'm working on the story, or they come to me at the end, or sometimes they come to me right then and there because I look at my timeline and I already know what I'm going to talk about in that chapter. So I'm able to develop the names of the chapters. But each outline, each chapter that you put in your outline, you're just going to put your main key points that you're going to talk about in that chapter so that you're not all over the place and you're not scrambling to try and figure out, well, what am I going to talk about in chapter 2 or 4 or 7? And then the next step is I just start writing. I start writing now that I have my characters developed, now that I know my main character's development, what their problem is, how they're going to solve the problem. I just start writing. And I don't always write in order. Sometimes I may write chapter 4 before I even write chapter 3, or I may write the ending of the story before I even start the beginning. This is the part where it's pretty much a rough draft, so there's no right or wrong of the order that you write. So I feel like, so as long as you have that timeline and you have that outline of your chapters, you already know what you're going to fill those chapters with. So you're not going to get boggled down by, oh my gosh, did I write this in another chapter, or what do I add to this chapter for this story? So the next thing I work on is editing and proofreading my rough draft. So now that you have your beginning, middle, and end all written out, you now have what is called a rough draft, and you need to go through it and make the corrections, the proper corrections, and grammar that needs to go through it. I tend to do it on my own, which can be a blessing and a curse in disguise, because when I do my proofreading of my own stuff, I tend to take things out and plug things in hopes that it develops the story even further and make it more interesting to potential readers. But if you are no good at grammar and editing your rough draft or your writings, then you can always ask a friend who is good at it, or a family member, or you can always pay someone to edit and proofread your your rough draft, because it's not your final draft just yet. And then the final thing in my process is creating my title for my book, and like I said before, my chapters. I have never written a title in the beginning. I've always written a title at the end, because the story, I feel, for myself dictates what the title is going to be. So I tend to leave the title at the end, and sometimes I leave the chapter titles at the end as well. I've always done that with my poems, with my short stories. I've always left the title towards the end. A lot of the times it's just because I haven't thought of a title while writing it, or even before I start writing it. So I tend to leave the title at the end of the process, when there's a final draft, when everything is done, and I write those words, "the end," at the end. So that is it. That is my process. It's a little hectic, I'll be honest with you. It's a little hectic the way I write my stories, the way I develop my stories, and always have. And I think it's just because I enjoy creating a world outside of the real world. So I hope this helped you get a little insight on my writing process. I know my writing process isn't the conventional way, but this is how I've always come up with my stories and how I write my books. But a little tidbit I can also give you is that I do a lot of research. I research the topic that I'm writing on. If I find that something is similar to what I'm writing, or if some key parts of maybe another book or a movie or even a documentary is like something I want to incorporate a little bit of or get inspired by for my stories, then I definitely do my research on it. I research places, I research names, I research history, just to make sure that it is, if I'm going to, like, say, I'm going to mention a landmark or something, I want to know exactly what that landmark location is, or pinpoint some history of it. So just do research and look at the topic that you're writing about, and it will inspire you to write your story along the way. Alright, that was it for this video. I hope this helped you some on getting you started on writing your thriller novel. If so, you can always reach out to me on Instagram for any questions that you might have. I'm more than happy to answer them for you. This was something different. I wanted to do something different and kind of break up the candle stuff, and I'm glad I was able to cover this topic for Queen VZ. I hope I'm saying it right. I'm so bad at names, but she is the one who left a comment, and I thank you for supporting my channel, and I thank you for bringing this topic up. It is one of my other passions, as I said, and I love talking about it, and I wish I had more people that I can talk about it with, and share thoughts and insight on it. But yeah, I hope this helps you some, just to get you started. I will say the key thing I feel when it comes to writing stories, which is different from writing like a blog post or a journal post. When it comes to writing stories and developing your stories, the key thing is your imagination. Use your imagination to envision a world, the world that you want to create. So I do that all the time. I take stuff from the real world, and I just do a whole, well, what if? So what if there was A, B, C, and D, and then this happened? So just start with that and build off of that what if, and that will help you, I feel will help you develop your story as you go. And if you get stuck and you get writer's block, then take a break and come back to it. It's always going to be there for you. But that was it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please hit that like button, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you can be notified when the next new video comes out. I do want to do more videos like this. I do want to talk a little bit more about my story that I'm currently writing. Maybe do some little short inserts of it and read to you guys. If you like that, then please leave a thumbs up in the comments down below. But I'm going to end this here. You can follow me on Instagram. All my links are in the description down below, and you can also follow or shop at my Etsy shop, which is also in the description down below. I'm like stumbling over words. In the description down below. So until next time, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week and show yourself a little more appreciation. So until next time, this is Tammy saying, take care, everyone.